what's up here? Yo, what's up? We out here, Buff Missionary back in these streets. I'm gonna tell you a little bit about my class. This is Doctoral Vlog Day, let's say 411, all right? 411. We're giving it to you out here in these doctoral streets. Talking in class over this past week, it's been really interesting. We're looking at mission and how this concept of anthropology, the study of humans, and all of its different branches play into how we can better serve people, which is really how I'm beginning to define what mission is all about. So when we talk about the Buff Missionary, we're talking about someone who's seeking to serve, not push an agenda, all right? Giving you my learning experience here and how I'm defining mission in terms of service. But it comes down to this quote, and this quote is actually from, let's see, The Ministry of Healing, page 470. This is a book by Ellen White, and it says this: the strongest argument in favor of the gospel is a loving and a lovable Christian. Now, think about this for a second. Most of us, when we think of love, even the concept of God is love, we say, well, God is love because God is loving, right? We look at the word as a description in the verb sense of what someone is doing to somebody else. And so by extension, if I say God is love, that means I should be love as well. And it makes sense and it sounds good on the surface, but what it ends up resulting in is us trying to be loving and looking for ways to love other people while not also seeing if we are even lovable to begin with. Think about it like this. If you are going to express love towards someone else, more often than not, it has less to do with how great you are at loving them and more to do with how lovable you actually are, which will determine how they react to your attempts at loving them, right? When you look at the pictures of God that people have put out there, the misunderstandings that come from different views and perspectives of God, it's been hard for people to love God because of how they view God. It doesn't have anything to do with how loving God is, but in the view that they have of God actually being lovable. And if people look at God in a very judgmental, non-relational kind of way, it's hard to see God as lovable. When you get the proper context, and that's what Jesus did by coming down to this earth, give us a correct and more accurate view of who God is while engaging in the work to save us. When we get to see the complete picture, the better picture, the right perspective, I would argue, of who God is, then we get to see how lovable God is. And by extension now, we respond better to the love that he is showing us. It's easier to appreciate it because we see God as lovable. Now make it personal. If I am someone who's trying to reflect Christ to somebody else, it's sure as hell not going to be about how great I know doctrine. It's not going to be about all of these things that I'm necessarily doing for other people, even though that stuff matters, right? The way that they respond to my efforts to love them are going to be, I would argue, directly proportional to how lovable I am. So let's break that down. I think in concept, you probably get what I'm saying, but it still seems a little bit vague. Like, well, how, I guess the natural next question would be then, how would I be lovable? Well, just because I'm doing all the right things doesn't mean that I'm somebody that other people want to love. And that's something completely different. So how am I really engaging with people? How am I really treating people? How am I acting towards people while trying to tell them the good news of the gospel? Some people go out with this very dogmatic, you're going to hell if you don't do this and if you don't do that and if you don't eat this or avoid that. And that doesn't make you very lovable. Regardless of if you say something that is true or false, the approach that you take in dealing with someone will turn people off to you. And if you're doing that, again, it doesn't matter what you're saying. It doesn't matter how great it is. If you don't approach it in love and with a lovable personality, no one's going to care. You know, 1 Corinthians 13, I was at my buddy's wedding a couple weeks ago in Texas, and we talked about 1 Corinthians 13. The mother of the bride actually read through that. And we read through it in class again. And it was just like, we think about it in terms of the wedding, but in a spiritual sense, we think about it in terms of, how do you say it? We think about it in terms of sharing truth, and we read about it, but we don't really think about what it would mean in a practical sense. It sounds good to say, though I speak with the tongues of men and of angels, but have not love, I am nothing. But you don't realize that I am nothing is the same thing as saying you're not lovable. That's why people are not going to care, no matter how great an orator you are. They're not going to care. You can be doing the greatest of the greatest things, but if you are not a lovable person, it doesn't matter. No one will care. It won't impact anyone. They're not going to see it as being beneficial to them or something that they even want to appreciate because of our approach. And we have to be aware of that. So I guess what I'm saying is everyone talks about 1 Corinthians 13 as the love chapter. And we view that as, we need to have love and love is important. But what does it mean if we don't have love in our approach? Being loving and being lovable are two different things. They're two sides of the same coin. And the more lovable you are, the easier it is for people to appreciate how loving you may be towards them. So we broke it down in class, and with these two questions, there's a couple different things to look at as we consider them. First, with are you loving? You can break this down by the tenderness, compassion, empathy, the care that you have when you engage and when you deal with other people. These are traits of being loving. So again, it's that give and take. It's that tension between what I'm doing and who I actually am. You can try to care for some people, but if you don't do it in a tender way, you can make great donations, but if you're not, you can do a whole lot of good. But if you don't do it with the lens and from the perspective of being tender, being caring, or trying to empathize with somebody else, that impacts the way that they receive what you're doing. And then the second question, are you lovable? I think, again, this is probably the one that people don't think about as much because they look at the things I'm doing as being the evidence of love. I know that a lot of Christians around me growing up approached it this way. Well, because I'm telling you about the gospel and because I'm telling you if you don't do this, you're going to hell, that's me being love. Or that's me, I'm doing it because I'm exhibiting God's love for you. And that's a very shallow and short-sighted view of what it really means to have God's love, because there's no reflective thought on, am I being lovable if I tell you that in that way? Okay, so are you lovable? Do you add value to other people's lives? I've said this before, when it comes to the gospel, we call it the good news. And if the good news doesn't sound like good news to other people when they hear it from us, then it is not good news. So if I go up and knock on someone's door and the first thing I'm telling them is, your life sucks and you're completely backwards, and what are you doing this? Why are you worshiping on this day? Why do you believe on that? Why do you do that? Why do you eat that? Why do you smoke that? Why do you drink that? If I come in with all of these things, I'm not approaching from someone who's being lovable, and I'm not approaching from someone who is giving any kind of idea that this is coming from a good place. Now, granted, you may want people to improve in the different things that they're doing, and that's okay. We all have people we care about, and there are things that they do that we would prefer that they didn't, because we know it'd be better for their health and for their lives if they didn't do those things, and if they did other things. That's okay. We're not talking about that. We're talking about the approach. The approach is what sets you apart from being lovable or not. How do you engage in these topics? And are you coming and just trying to knock the door down with everything you have to say? Or are you trying to understand what's going on from someone else's perspective and where they are? And then managing not only the expectation, but the intensity and maybe the smoothness and the feeling to your approach, the tenderness in which you engage with somebody. That's where the difference is. Adding value to people's lives it's often appreciated or not based on the approach. Based on the approach and how you approach somebody with something. I've talked many times about how there are students that I worked with back out in the islands who I had to have a hard conversation with them, and other staff members may have had to as well. And because I was able to do it, thankfully, in a more gentle way, and because it was based on the friendship and the relationship that I had with them, that is something I still have with those students today. Whereas for other staff that they may have encountered and heard approach them about these same things, because it didn't have any of that, it was harder for them to take it as you're doing this for my benefit. And it was easier for them to take it as you're out to get me. I didn't experience that with the students because of the approach. And thankfully, at least in a couple of these situations, they were able to take it from the perspective of, you're telling me this because you love me, because you care for me, and you want better for me. Adding value, that's what that's about. Do you publicly recognize others' contributions? Are we quicker to try to elevate what we're doing and bring what we're talking about and all the good things that we've done into the mix? Or can we afford to take a step back and highlight someone else and show that we care about the other things, however small or how big people are doing, to appreciate them? That's an aspect of being lovable. Humility is a part of being lovable. People don't, well, some people do gravitate to prideful people. But if you're like me, people who can talk about nothing but themselves, you get tired of listening to them very quickly. You don't want to be around them anymore. So think about that. You lifting other people up, or can you only talk about yourself? It makes a difference in how people perceive your love towards them and your lovability in general. My professor had this statement: while you're trying to be a star, don't forget to give other people the opportunity to shine as well. That's how your star becomes brighter, by helping others to shine around you. So it ain't just you shining, but it's everybody around you shining as a collective, and it's brighter that way. And you don't have to, I think in our society nowadays, we think that for me to be better and for me to do more, I have to make someone else worse or take something away from somebody else. And that's not always the case. We can all rise together. We can definitely rise together. The big question, hand in hand with are we lovable, do other people feel valued by us? Do people feel used by us? Do they feel like when we engage with them, we're only there because we want something? Or can we actually fellowship and be in the place with somebody to where they feel valued because we're there, and not just as some kind of resource that we're trying to mine? I have a friend, she has a dad who runs like a doctoral clinic, something like that. And there was a girl that she might have considered to be her friend earlier in the school year, and it ended up going both ways. And it's kind of funny how this happened. The other girl was like the leader of a music group for one of the church gatherings on campus, and my friend was talking with her about perhaps getting involved with this. She likes to sing and participate in worship, so she wanted to be a part of the group. Never heard anything back from this girl. So you go throughout the entire school year, there's no communication, clearly not really a friendship or even a relationship there at all. And yet when it comes time for the summer, this other girl who ignored my friend when it came to helping her out and helping her to be a part of the music, the worship team, she's now asking my friend, hey, doesn't your dad do this? Can you talk to him and help me to get a summer job? What? It's one thing, forget the first part of the story, right? If she just comes up and says that out of the blue to someone that there's not a relationship with, that'd be bad enough. And now you feel nothing but used. But it's even worse when you couldn't help someone be a part of a group that you were a part of, and now you're coming to ask the same person to do you a favor? Like, what are we talking about here? That's not being very lovable. And my friend, she asked me what I thought she should do. I said, put her in contact with your dad. Let her ask him for herself instead of trying to go through you and try to get some hookup when there's not even a relationship or a friendship there. That's what she did. And I think that was the right thing to do. But that's the thing. Do people feel valued by you? Or whenever you show up, do they feel like, all right, what's the next question? What else is this person gonna want? We don't want to do that. We don't want to come across that way. And I think when you talk about mission, it's very easy for people to get that vibe. Well, how so, you might ask? Well, if I'm only being friends, there's this whole thing called friendship evangelism that a couple of my professors have talked about having a problem with, and I'm beginning to have more of a problem with it too. It's this idea that I'm gonna be friends with all kinds of people, but the reason I'm doing it is to look for that in. So, when the time is right, I can start dropping the gospel and all these truths on you, as opposed to just being a friend with you to be a friend with you. Imagine that. Take out the ulterior motives. It's a game changer. You don't have to be on eggshells wondering when is this person going to give me a chance to say what my agenda is. Just be a friend. Just be a friend. And it's hard these days because everybody wants something. But when we're talking about trying to share Christ with people, maybe just being a friend with them and showing them in the way that we engage with them, maybe that's enough. Maybe I don't need for them to get baptized and to accept the 28 fundamentals and all this kind of stuff. Maybe the mission is just to show Jesus to them and let that be where it ends as far as I'm concerned. Bring value to them so that way they're getting value from being with me and I'm not just engaging with them because I want something. It's too easy to do that. We do it all too often, and most of the time we don't even realize it. So that's what it comes down to. Being more selfless in our relationships instead of opportunistic. Not trying to make friends and choose friends because of what I can get with them, but just being friends with people for the sake of being friends with people. Hanging out with people because they're people and you enjoy spending time with them, not because you can get something from them. The strongest argument in favor of the gospel is a loving and a lovable Christian. And I think for us, it requires a little bit deeper reflection, because I believe the first question we answer pretty easily and say, yeah, I can love, I can be a loving person. But I think the other question is more important. Are we lovable? And what does that mean? And if we think about that, we'll probably have to do a little bit of heart search and seeing how we can become more lovable and embrace these things that we talked about here in this video. But also realizing that this is the thing that impacts how people view your love, and whether or not it's just something opportunistic or selfish or something that's a benefit to them. And for us, for all the benefits and things that we want in this world, I would hope that one of the things you want more than anything else is to be a blessing and a benefit to someone else. And to be it when you show up, people are not wishing that you weren't there because they know you're just going to ask for the next thing, but because you actually bring value to them and their experience in their lives. And they'll want you around more for that. So keep that in mind. We out here and we out. Catch you in the next one. Peace.